I don't know, 30 seconds or so. And I'm only streaming this on Facebook, YouTube, and then Twitch as well. So Twitch will be the first platform. Then we'll roll the intro video, intro clip, and then we'll kind of get into it from there. What do you got to drink over there, man? Nothing? I should.
Seltzer.
The seltzer. The 11 percenters.
Actually, Maddie, is that margarita mix still good? I could have a margarita,
Decide
but
to
it
opt
needs
into it.
mixing. It needs mixing,
On the rocks or
which
what?
needs effort. Oh, it would be on the rocks.
Oh man. Versus
Well, if you do make yourself one, Maddie, you should make me one too.
oh, get those margarita mixes out here. It's a Monday too. You know, Monday's soon gonna
Margarita Monday. Margarita Monday.
Monday will soon be my Sunday. So,
Oof.
all right, man. Let's get into it.
When are you going to Saturdays? It's like the week after Miami.
For what?
Saturday for work.
Oh yeah, yep. Right after Miami, on to new schedule. All right, you want to get into it?
Yeah, let's go.
We're gonna hit the intro, y'all. Enjoy. Fire. We're getting there.
It's pretty good.
I'm hoping that the video streaming quality is going to be decent right now. I could tell before I had just a little bit lag. So definitely let us know in the comments if there's a little lag. And if there is, I think it's almost time to get an upgraded computer anyways. So that's something that I'm going to have to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, you got to make that decision between Microsoft or Apple. I don't know if Apple's the best computer to stream on, but I guess if you're not streaming like games specifically, it could be. I don't know. It depends on how old your MacBook is.
Yeah, I think the
Mine definitely could not handle it.
Well, the problem is I got the MacBook Pro without the upgraded memory. And the way that they
Oh,
build
yeah,
these things now, you can't really put memory into it. But, welcome everyone. And, we're back on here. Jack and I are going to be talking about Ray Dalio today. So there's a pretty large crypto conference going on called Consensus 2021. It's been hosted every year in New York, and this year it was virtual again. But they have large panel of speakers. This year was interesting, though. They had Ray Dalio on, and if those don't know who Ray Dalio is, he's the founder and board member and chief investment officer of Bridgewater Associates down in Madison, Connecticut.
I think it's just Bridgewater.
Yeah, it is significant.
Something like that.
Top
Westport,
hedge.
Bridgewater area.
Is he the top hedge fund in the world? I think they have some of the most.
Yeah, the largest, I believe. Yeah.
So we'll be talking about that, and then I want to tie in a little talk around Jerome Powell and central bank digital currencies again. I think that's something that, based on what we heard from Ray today, central bank digital currencies are becoming a real thing, and I think that deserves at least some conversation on the matter.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, I'm not lagging that bad. Am I lagging to you?
No, you're not.
Okay. Got everything shut down too. All right, man. So let's get into it. Did you watch Consensus? Did you watch the speech today?
I did not. I only saw like clips of what Ray Dalio said, which was pretty interesting. I guess we've always known that like it was coming. We've been fans of his work since probably 2017, 2018 is when we actually started talking about him originally. And a lot of people in the Bitcoin space assume that he would be one of the earlier folks into Bitcoin because of his writing of Big Debt Crises. And he basically talks about everything that the United States is experiencing and a debt crisis, and that we're on the longer term cycle of a debt crisis. So we're on the probably the 80 to 100-year cycle. We definitely peaked. I think peak GDP was in 2018, and now we're kind of on the downtrend on that. And it's not just a short term business cycle. This is the full boom and bust credit cycle that he talks about. And he always speaks of people moving into a different stores of value, specifically gold, other assets, and stocks. And he never really mentioned Bitcoin. And I think there's those articles of him in 2017 saying that it was a bubble. And today, to no shock, he said, "Yeah, I own Bitcoin, and I would rather own Bitcoin over bonds."
He did. One of the interesting things that I've always taken away from Dalio is, his focus on history and cycles, right? And cycles through
Yeah,
history, monetary cycles, business cycles, cycles of world powers. And he has been talking about a lot of this stuff for a few years now. And during the interview today, he was really just reiterating it and hammering it home, like you were saying, how we're ending this, this monetary cycle, really, the reserve currency changing over, competing world powers. And one of the main takeaways, though, is the fact that people today don't understand what's going on because we don't know anyone that has been alive. There's not many people alive today that had seen the last time that this would have happened historically. And I think that's so
yeah,
interesting, especially from like a psychological perspective, is that like you can have an idea about what happens because we read it in history books, but in order to truly understand what will happen is we're going to have to go through it. And a lot of people aren't prepared. A lot of people are prepared. A lot of people just don't know. They're stuck in the cycle. But he was
yeah,
really hammering home that point today.
yeah. I mean, I only caught the clips of him talking about Bitcoin, but it just it just seems like we knew before he knew that it was really happening. I mean, I guess he kind of has always been hinting at being bearish, but like, you know, we found this in, 2017, and then we started really talking about it privately in 2018, I would say. 2017 was just kind of the tail end of the hype, and I guess we grew our conviction through 2018 and 2019, becoming self-claimed hodlers, I guess. But we knew that
Or
this was
diamond
coming,
hands, or diamond
and
hands
it
as
was
it's known today, as
yeah,
Crespo
specifically
says.
it was like what, 2018 is when the repo thing happened. Uh, was it 2018 or was that 2019?
I think
I
2019 we
know,
started to see it.
yeah,
The beginning of
2019 was
2019,
the
and then at the end of
2019 was
2019 they
the
started QE again.
Yeah, yeah. So 2019 was the repo crisis, and that was basically the pipes in your basement exploding, and you knew you had a problem, but unless you understood it, uh, you didn't know what the problem really was. But we knew there was something wrong in 2018 when I think that was the December where everything crashed like 25% from October to December. And that was because the Fed was trying to normalize and they couldn't. They were basically going to crash the economy if they kept raising rates any higher. So they quickly backtracked on all that. So going back to what we were saying, we knew it was coming, and we knew Dalio was going to be one of the head guys in it, and now he's finally on our side, which is pretty crazy. Just to be like he's gonna go to Bitcoin, and people call you crazy, and then 2 years later, here we are.
How have you been explaining to people about like what's actually happening right now? And I'll draw one example to it because one thing that I've been trying to talk about is that 2008, the housing crisis in 2007, 8, and 9. was really supposed to be kind of the end of this system. The end of really the entire banking system was collapsing around the world. And
Yeah, yeah, that was the over leverage in the housing
this,
in the
this
housing
experiment
market.
of like quantitative easing, otherwise known as massive inflation, right? So for the first time, central banks realized that they could just create 25%, 10% more dollars and experiment. And it's really inflated this bubble that is like the last housing crisis now times, more than two. And
Yeah.
like, but how do you explain to someone that like we're going through an event where there's going to be a shift and a change in the money that they've been used to seeing for their entire life? Like, how do you even explain that to someone?
Um, well, I think you kind of have to go back a little bit. So I just listened to an interview that Ross Stevens just did. He's from NIDIG. So he's basically explained that he's starting to find his voice in the Bitcoin community. He knows that this is imperative to him, and this is what he has to do because of the societal impacts of what's happening. But basically, the way he described it was 2018 or 2008. The American dream became very hard after 2008. And he said, if you didn't own assets going into COVID, the American dream is gone. And he's like, that's not right. And that's because of the Fed coming in, stepping in, and printing massive amounts of money to keep the system afloat. So to tie it all together, I think there's a lot going on. It's really tough to talk about this with people who don't even know what money is, and they just go based off of their assumptions of what they grew up knowing. So I mean, you basically learn about money probably through your parents and their spending habits. Hopefully you learn it through school, but a lot of people don't. Or you just make the assumption that you learn because you use it and you kind of know what it is, but no one actually questions where money comes from. And we kind of grew up in this like delusion. I don't know how to call it specifically, but this idea that the government issues money. And when did that really occur? And how did we get here? And I think we're coming to this awakening that that this isn't the truth. And so we've strayed so far away from the truth, and now we're seeing society begin to fray and fracture. That the truth is actually coming out is that you can't print your way out of things. I think people are starting to understand, why do I have to work if you can just print me some money? Why do I have to pay tax? Why don't you just print the money that I owe you? And it's very it's a very difficult thing to approach because every person, you have to approach it differently, because everyone's going to find that clicking moment through some different approach. There isn't like a cookie cutter way to go about it. So that's kind of the way I'm looking at this, is like, you have to establish what the problem is, and then you can kind of uh, begin to muster up a solution. But a lot of people don't know what the problem is because we're in this first layer thinking process where we see something happening in society and we just think, oh, it's whatever is most directly correlated to it. It's not a cause and effect from something maybe much more systemic. And that makes it very difficult to actually tackle because the problem is inherently hidden in itself.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I want to step back there. You brought up a good point about, you know, governments controlling the money supply and how
Yeah,
that hasn't happened in history. That hasn't always existed, right? This is kind of something that's fairly new. It's been around periodically
yeah,
throughout different parts of history, but we haven't been in a world where governments haven't controlled the money system and the monetary system. And we know that that started with uh, Britain, right? And this was, I don't know, I forget the prince or the king, King George, I think maybe potentially.
I'm not sure where it started.
But this goes back to like the 1600s, right? And you
Gold
had,
has been used for like 5,000 years.
well, what essentially was it, right? Because I view currency like, if you're a government, owning the money, owning the currency is like the biggest form of control you could have on a population, essentially. Like
Yeah, I
it's a
mean,
monopoly over the creation and the supply of the currency of things that people are going to spend. Um,
yeah, so you have to establish like a few things like what is wealth? Wealth is kind of just like a savings or a storage of useful things. So like what would be considered wealthy? Well, what if you had food, enough food to last you until you died? That would be pretty wealthy, right? You had enough energy saved up for you until you died. You had enough water saved up for you to die. So it's like society, we organize our ways, and then we build up a excess of goods, and that is what wealth is. Well, what is money? Money is just the representation of time and energy, really, to trade wealth. It is the most tradable good. So if you think about what are you working for, you're taking some specialty that you have and converting it into money so that you can spend it broadly to somebody else's specialty to fit your time, to fit your needs at a specific time. And so, if you think about what the money represents, it really just represents time and energy that you spent doing something productive and you're getting paid to do it. And so, if you can control someone's time and energy, you're essentially controlling their life. So, if you control the money, you control people. And it's the same with food because it's a basic necessity. But we reorganize society in a way that you can't save wealth because no one's out here just hoarding food. A lot of it's going to expire. We all want to hoard money. And so, if your money is constantly bleeding, you have a big problem. And that's essentially the dumbed down idea of what's happening is that you have a water bottle, which represents your money, and there's a small hole in it. And the hole is somehow getting bigger and bigger. So the more water you put in, the more water comes out. And it's getting harder and harder to actually make that meter go up. And it's and you're not in control of the size of that hole. You kind of are just born within this government. You're born in the United States, you're born under a government. It's a legal monopoly, which is really just in terms of like what Robert Breedlove says in his sovereignism things. If you look at the histories of government, it really is just a protection agency against violence.
mm,
And if you're on an island, you're going to have smaller forms of government rise up, and then they're eventually going to battle, and one of them's going to win, and you're going to have a monopoly on protection from violence. And once you have those monopoly, kind of set, you kind of get into they don't have a cost anymore. There's no competitor, so they can kind of do whatever they want to you. And
mm,
that's kind of where we are in the broad scheme of things. Tying it back to money, um, we somehow let the government control it. And that's because of what was money before the dollar. And for we both know that it was gold. And so why did we give up our money? And how did we give up our money? Well, like as we began to develop, uh, we needed to move money around faster to meet the needs. We need to divide it into different units, which gold is very bad at doing. Divisibility and portability are two very inefficient things. You can obviously divide gold, but it's tough.
mm,
Not everyone's going to go melt their gold on site and go give them a fraction of a bar. They're not going to do that. So somebody at some point convinced everyone, hey, we'll just give you a piece of paper to resemble your gold. You trust us. And they acquired all the gold. And then they can kind of do whatever they want when they have the gold. And the trust broke and the pegs broke. And now we're on a standard of there's no peg. And so we're all working, giving up our time and our energy to earn this money that has no peg to time or energy. Gold had time and energy costs associated with it to produce. So if you wanted to go get more gold, you had to go dig it out of the ground. Time and energy.
yeah,
That is a real economic cost. And so when somebody can just print a piece of paper and use that to their advantage, you are fully taking control over everyone else's time and energy because you're using it to your advantage. And so you're essentially stealing it from people. And I guess after World War II, it was all very good because we were a majority of the GDP. And as the rest of the world kind of started to develop, the money really started to break because we have this need to keep dollars out, and if we have trade imbalances, it's not possible to do that. And that's kind of more of a technical side of what's going on.
Yeah, I think and then now inflation and theft comes into it because what's really like at a high level too, from what people will notice today is that groceries become more expensive, gasoline, lumber, commodities become more expensive, cost of living becomes more expensive, and and then eventually the currency isn't worth anything anymore, right? But I like how you
Yeah,
tie in, and I think it's important for people to understand too the concept of your time is really value. Your the money that you have, the wealth
that's
that
all
you
you have is time.
is and that relates back to your time because you have to work, you have to put out some effort, produce some product, produce some productivity that you're then paid for in the form of a salary or a paycheck, and that's a representation of your time, your energy, your output that you had. And this is where when we talk about inflation, which is the creation of more of the money supply, and this happens in this government money system like we have with dollars today because they control the money supply. They can create more at will. It hasn't always been like that, and it's not supposed to be like that, but it is like that now. And
Yeah,
that is it's a theft from you as the individual. It's taking away from your time, hiddenly too, in a tax manner. And
yeah,
and this is why these events are so big, and I think that also explains why we are seeing all of these larger macro events happening around the world with different populations, mass protests, wealth inequality, the Gilets Jaunes movement. All of these movements around the world have all been about the same thing for 10 years now. And it's all connected here. One thing I want to dig into as well along these lines is, once we do transition to this new economy with digital currencies, Bitcoin, but also central bank digital currencies, because now we're seeing the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank, Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Fed, now has made it very public that the digital dollar is coming. China has a digital yuan that they're getting ready to launch here, and Ray Dalio has talked about the threat to Bitcoin by these other governments and central bank digital currencies, at least in the short run. And these, if you tie in like why everyone's protesting is because the money's bad because they're being stolen from, and then now you're going to have these governments that stole from these people in the past with the last currency. They're going to try to do it again with these new digital currencies. I think this is where you see the revolutions, and the actual changes in society. And I do believe that there will be war before there's peace. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of what we see playing out with once these central bank digital currencies are actually rolled out, what governments might try to do to Bitcoin, what they might try to do to other decentralized cryptocurrencies, and ultimately why I think it'll fail in the long run. Right, that's a big thing. But like overall, like what are your views on that, Jack? I know you're big on it as well.
um,
You've been following like
yeah.
hard.
So when I think kind of what's happening. I mean, obviously, I don't think the government is ultimately terribly bad, but I think their actions are they have very bad side effects. So the money printing and the stimulus checks are kind of creating you're creating a dependency on the state for you to survive through unemployment. And these stimulus checks, you're creating people who are no longer sovereign. They rely on somebody else to feed them and to care for them. And it's not like they have these disabilities. They are stuck. They have no other choice but to accept these handouts. And so they're going to be the people that are going to go to this digital system the fastest because I'm assuming that's where they're going to get their handouts in. And so they have an incentive to go there because if they don't, they're going to lose whatever they had before. And the idea is that they're going to use these digital means to control people. So, if you think about cash, the freedom that cash gives you, if we assume that cash, everyone will accept the cash, you can do whatever you want with it. You pull it out of the bank, and I mean, you can transact without the government seeing it. But now we're on a digital realm. The government is watching everything that we do. There's no more privacy. They can see everything that we do. And guess what? I can't pull my money out of a bank anymore. It's stuck there. I have to transact through their application, so they can block whatever they want you to do. They can make you spend where they want you to spend. They're essentially controlling, they could control everything about your spending habits. And you tie this in with what uh, social media companies are doing, which they're basically using these AI algorithms to control people, to give them what they want to see, to get more time. You can see something similar. You can see a kind of a joint force to kind of keep people mentally stuck in this spending habit and forced to spend there. And if you really look at the problems with communism specifically, there was one thing that was lacking in communism, which is information. And so the reason why the USSR basically failed is because you had a group of, say, 10 people making the decisions for millions of people, where in a free market you have millions of people making decisions for themselves. And so each person making the decision is a node of information, making economic decisions based off of what they see. And so you are the collective sum of the people making the decisions. And so when you have, smaller groups of people making decisions for the whole, they're not getting all the information. They're focused in on one particular point. They're not focused in on the whole. And so you misallocate resources. Well, now you take a digital means and you throw in AI, which we know is corrupting the younger generation specifically. We know what life was like before social media, but these kids don't. These kids don't know what their life was like before it was, what it was like to not be controlled by some AI. And it seems so crazy, but it's go try to get a young kid to give up their phone, and you can't.
Right.
Even though they say that they're not addicted to it, they are. And I know that myself is probably included in that to some extent. It's very difficult to get rid of these things that are supposed to be making us smarter, more efficient. So you mix in AI, and now your information problem is solved. You have these neural network and these machine learning software that can basically allocate resources and centrally plan an economy in the most efficient way, based off of some AI that a human could no longer do. So you have this scenario where the elite will, if we fall for this, the elites could have control forever. And that's the fear.
So the money, I think this is an important thing to draw an attention point to, is that the difference between a central bank digital currency, and by that we mean, the U.S. Federal Reserve Bank says there's now a digital dollar that's on a blockchain. It's a crypto, but it's not like Bitcoin. And the reason why it's different than Bitcoin is because Bitcoin has a fixed supply. Bitcoin is decentralized. It's not owned by one government, one country, one company. It's distributed all around the world, so you can't shut it down. Whereas these central bank digital currencies, these central bank cryptos, or these government cryptos, these government coins you're going to see come out, there's no cap to them. As a matter of fact, the inflation that we see today that devalues everyone's money that we're talking about, like this money creation that's been happening, the stimulus checks, this and that, it can happen with these government cryptos, but there's even, they can make it even more divisible. So there could be more, they can create more of these more of a cap. So there's no cap to these cryptos. They're centralized, so they'll be owned and controlled by one company, or I'm sorry, one country, probably with one company, one or two companies. And there's controls and features with this new form of money that we haven't had in the past. Like, for example, shutting off the money, right? Or having a time expiration on when you can spend the money. So instead of like dollar bills that Jack and I could just hand back and forth in the past, no one could stop that. No one can see that. Now, the government will have the ability to not just control the money, the creation of money, the distribution of the money, but they can give you money and say you have 24 hours or 48 hours to spend this, or you can only spend this at certain locations. and then they can
Hmm.
withdraw those funds a lot faster. So it's this double-edged sword, and like we've known this the whole time with Bitcoin, that it was going to open up an industry that was going to change the world, but there's a double-edged sword to everything, right? Where it could also create the ability for authoritative or totalitarian governments to now have this perfect tool for mass financial totalitarianism, where they can control their society to a T, just from manipulating the currency in the background with the technology. Um, but I don't think these are going to win in the long run, because I do think ultimately the market and people are going to use and adopt what they want. And
Yeah.
the funny thing you do see about government now, and it's funny you bring up the communists too, because that control of information is just like it was in the 20th century with communism before we had the internet. What are we seeing right now? Censoring on social media platforms, censoring on news and information, stopping the flow of information, just like in communism, so that the people can't collectively see and understand what each other are thinking, and that they're all going through the same experiences.
And now we can't
And
even
it's a
talk in
fight.
person.
Can't even talk in person now, right? But I
Well,
am.
we're slowly getting out of that, but yeah,
Yeah. But it's
it was
changing now, right?
crazy.
Because you do see the entrepreneurs that are creating new social media platforms where they can't censor. I even notice, in my day to day, there are some people that are waking up to the fact that there's some bullshit going on around here, and they don't actually trust their government, and they don't actually trust what's going on in society. So I do think at some point or another, like, it's going to get bad before it gets worse, but at some point or another, the market, the people, us collectively will decide what we want to save in, what we want to spend in. Um, but Dalio, though, and he said this today, he does think that, again, there's governments have that monopoly on money, and they're not going to want to give that up. And he said that uh, Bitcoin's worst thing could be its success at the end of the day, which
Yeah,
was a weird statement. You think about that statement, and it's like, if it does work, it's actually the worst thing that can happen to it, because of, I think, this hidden violence that it will probably bring from governments that are trying to work against it. But ultimately, though, we know that Bitcoin's code, like, you can't fight against it, right? Because the more you fight
it's
against it,
just speech.
the
It's just
more.
an idea, and you can't destroy an idea anymore. It's all it is an idea at the end of the day. Um, I don't know. I don't want to harp on the CBDCs too much, but I mean, if you look at Ethereum, like they're already struggling as it is to have some sort of programmable money, which is a free market competitor to Bitcoin.
Mm,
It is not decentralized. But if you look at, they can't even get really. I don't think the Fed will be able to get this money to have expiration dates, and they're saying that the China digital yuan is already a flop, and that the users do not like it, and they don't find it to be very useful. So I think that they got caught with their pants down, and they're rushing to get a product out, and it just ultimately won't even compete to something that the free market will come out with. And I think you have to realize that all of the smartest people in this industry, they're all working in Bitcoin. And so it has a head start of about 12 years, 10 years,
yeah.
something along those lines. So I'm not too worried really about the CBDCs too much. I think just attacking the on ramps and the off ramps will be a phase, and it's not going to die. It won't die. You can look at other places that have banned it before to see what will happen uh, for the on ramps and off ramps. Yes, it will be harder, but ultimately that's going to make the price go up.
Mm.
If you can't sell it and you have to just trade it with peer to peer, it's ultimately going to make it more of a commodity. It's going to be more scarce in that sense because it's less accessible. So it ultimately kind of gives the proof that Bitcoin is here to stay.
It's amazing how it is the first piece of money, or the first form of money we've had, that is the scarcest form of money, right? It's more scarce than gold. There's a fixed supply, but it's also, you can't stop it. You can't shut it down. That was one of the things that I first learned about Bitcoin that really sold me and sent me further down the rabbit hole, was number one, learning about how it solved the double spend issue. So like how people can write a check or your credit card could bounce, right? You could pay someone and not actually have that money in your account. That
Yeah,
you can't do with Bitcoin. When I learned that was solved with Bitcoin first, that fascinated me, coming from finance and understanding those issues with payments, but also the fact that it's it's a also a piece of code. It's a distributed network. It's something where everyone has these little copies of it all around the world, and you cannot stop it. You, in order to stop it, you'd have to shut down the entire internet all around the world at once. Like, dude, what the fuck? Right? Like,
yeah.
that's some powerful shit.
I think when you see a big government actually go after it, like it just doesn't feel like anyone has actually tried yet. Like that's the way I kind of feel is I think once we see a big government actually try to go after it and the fact that it won't die, I think I think that's going to be the nail in the coffin for governments. They're going to realize it's either get with it or get rolled over type of thing where okay, maybe it's not in our best interest to fight it. We might have to actually cede our power here
Yeah.
if we want to. If we because if think about it, if a government realizes that they can't stop it, they just start printing all of their money to buy it everywhere. Imagine if you can keep that hidden for a few months. You're just printing your own currency and you're buying the hardest form of currency in the world or the hardest money in the world. I think that's a very high possibility of happening at some point.
That now, and I agree with you. I think that it's going to come to a point where governments are going to realize that you're better off just going with it than against it, and
Yeah,
and then that's probably why we haven't heard any announcements from any of them. Um, but we do know, and one of the reasons, like we have the Bitcoin Money Peace brand that we do. Small plug: if you want to join our Telegram chat, we've got like 15 people in there. It's really great right now. The link's in the description. We only talk about Bitcoin and crypto trading, what's going on in the marketplace. But the reason why we created that brand is because ultimately, this new form of money, this hard form of money, Bitcoin, will ultimately, we believe, bring peace back to humanity, peace back to society, just like what existed when gold was the actual form of money, right? Historically, when there was a sound form of money, and by sound I mean you didn't have these bills that government controlled and they control the supply of it, actual scarce money. When society has lived during those times, it's been very prosperous for people. There's no wars because governments can't go and create $500 billion out of thin air and go to war and supply their soldiers. People have more value in their savings and their wealth so that they can plan for the future. They can plan to have kids. They can plan to build a house. They can plan for
yeah.
trips. They can grow. They can grow businesses. It's a very prosperous time in society, and
It's the cultural explosion.
the
It's when you
cultural,
see a lot of
kind of
very good art.
like this background right now.
Yeah, a lot of art and music. Well, I think it's I wouldn't say it's the best time, but I guess during the times of peace, it is the best. When there were the times of peace, there was the most prosperity, but ultimately governments would still go to war for other people's money or wealth. So uh, when that's not confiscatable in terms of money, you're only confiscating resources. You're in a very different scenario. Um, I don't know. There's a whole lot going on, and I don't even know if looking back at history can give you the full playbook as to what's going to happen. Just because the whole dichotomy of everything that is going on right now is just something we've never seen before. So looking back at history can only give you a guide. It won't give you the pure answers.
Well,
And
yeah, and the saying's what is it? Never repeats, but it rhymes. So you never
yeah,
really
but
know
I
what it's going to
think
look like.
I think technology is changing that, and technology is this new variable that really didn't exist in the other cycles, where technology is just really compressing information and making it cheap and free. And so that is the complete opposite of growth. Something becoming cheap and free is not growth.
Hmm.
And so you have technology on one end, which wants to lower the price of everything. Basically, everything that technology touches, it wants to lower the price. It wants to free up our time and reduce costs. And so, if that was broadly shared, you would have a pretty prosperous society. But they're printing directly against those productivity gains, and that money is getting funneled from the top. So we're not actually experiencing any of the productivity gains that we should be experiencing because somebody is controlling the money. And any company that knows that if they want to stay profitable, they have to remove jobs as fast as they can and use technology. So uh, an inflationary currency is not compatible with uh, with this system where you will manipulate the money supply to produce growth on paper at any cost is what
Mm.
essentially is happening right now. Um, and it's just not compatible. You're on a planet of finite resources. It's not possible to grow forever.
Mm.
So, you know, things should be getting cheaper, and you have to look at, well, why aren't they? Like why is everything in life getting more expensive? You have AI technology removing our jobs, but you're still living in the framework that I need to save more for retirement so that I can hit retirement. But what if this AI comes and removes my job? Like, what do I do? I'll never retire at that point. You'll never retire in that framework where you have to save more and more and more. But yet you have technology removing jobs faster, and you have the Fed on the other side mandating that we have jobs. It's like the only jobs that are going to exist are the jobs that are still more productive than technology and AI. It's the only job that's going to exist. And over time, that's just going to continue to get wiped out. And so, ideally, what should be going on? Well, in a sound money system, the price of everything goes down because of technology. So your money theoretically buys you more than it did tomorrow than it does today. So you can now save for the future, and you can prepare for the future through that. And basically, in the sense that with your money becoming more and more valuable over time, your life becomes more and more valuable over time as well, which is kind of this weird concept to think about. So,
Well, we've never lived in a world like that. Yeah, right.
yeah, I mean, where the world is going, I don't think anyone's ready to grasp with, and it's so hard to change your mental vision of that world too, because we're so stuck in the current place that we're at, that it's so hard to envision this type of world where a lot of things become free, if not close to free. And what are we working for at this point? Our time is more free. Where is our attention, our focus, and our energy going? And that's kind of what we're here to figure out, I guess.
Well, I want to. So let's kind of transition then into like, because like we covered, I think we've covered a good amount about Dalio. Again, Dalio, Ray Dalio, big hedge fund investor, um,
Yep.
one of the biggest in the world. He's pretty much joined all the other billionaire investors now that have said, Bitcoin over cash, Bitcoin over bonds, Bitcoin over investments. Paul Tudor Jones was the other really big hedge fund investor that said, Bitcoin's the fastest horse at the race, talking that it's going to, grow the fastest over the next decade plus more. Um,
You
uh,
also have Druck and
Steve Druck,
Dalio.
yeah.
Yeah, you also have Druck and Dalio, both within like a 2 week span, basically signaling that the dollar is at its end.
This is
And
the
you know,
50th. This is the 50th birthday this year of the U.S. dollar. Isn't that
is
incredible?
it? Yeah,
You think it's going to make it past this year?
I don't think so. I mean, I do, but I don't. I think it will be there, but I think when we go back in history, because like one thing that I read that was very interesting, it's like when the fall of Rome happened, do you think the Rome citizens were like, today Rome collapsed? You know? Like, do you think that actually happened? No. Like, they were still living their day to day lives. There was no one in the news saying, yeah, today Rome collapsed. There's when you look back in history, there's a specific point at which Rome did well is the collective idea of when Rome collapsed.
Right.
And so I think that's going to happen something similar with the United States and the dollar. And I think we have a potential to rebuild. I just think that if we stick to our guns, we won't. Because if we stick to fighting the system, I don't think it's possible to walk out on the other side of this trade ahead. So I think it's very important to kind of to put that out there. Is I think when we look back at in history, I think we could even maybe say that maybe COVID and all that printing was when the dollar died.
Mm.
I don't really know.
There's
I
some
don't think there's
people
going to be
I
a specific time.
yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. Like looking at it from a historical perspective, like nothing ever happens just like one day really. Like these big events are an accumulation of like 5, 10, 15, 20. Sometimes with the Romans, right, it was over 100, 200 years really that collapse came about. Um,
Yeah.
and I
So I think it's important to hit on one key point. Well, it's kind of two, and it goes back to dollars and bonds. I was asked by a coworker today. He's like, "What's going on with Bitcoin?" And I didn't really even realize that he knew that I was interested in it. And I was like, "Do you want like my unfiltered response?" Like we're in the break room, so I was like, "Do you want my unfiltered response?" He's like, "Yeah." And I went through my whole spiel about what is money, and I said, I think that every single person needs to own it, and you need to hedge out your currency risk because we still are living in this idea that the system that we live in is safe, but that's where all the risk is. The whole system is at risk, and so if you don't own a little bit of this new system that is being built, you could ultimately be left behind with nothing. And I tell this to the older folks who are near retirement. Like if I was near retirement and I couldn't stomach volatility, I would be, and I knew what I know now, I would be very nervous for the future because essentially what you're going on is, well, what is everyone holding when they're going into retirement? Well, they need income, so it's coming from bonds. They're holding bonds. And essentially a bond is just the debt. It's a promise to be paid dollars in the future. And what's a good way to steal a bunch of wealth from people? Well, we'll just make it so that we pay them the nominal dollars, but the dollars don't buy them what they thought it was going to buy them. It bought them more when they lent us the dollars than when we paid them back. That's the game. That in short, that's the game. Your
Al,
dollars when you lent them to us bought you more than when we give them back.
Alan
So
Greenspan very famously for saying, "We can promise you that we'll pay you." Talking about pensions, we can promise you that we'll pay you, but we can't promise you what it's worth.
exactly. So what happens in this where you can manipulate the currency? Well, you can just extend and pretend. Oh yeah, we'll pay back the debt. We're not gonna go under, and so you can just print and stop these things from happening because the nominal value sum adds up, but the purchasing power is what you lost. So yeah, all these people who have pensions and retirement plans, and they're all guaranteed a certain amount of dollars. Well, yeah, I can guarantee you'll get those dollars, but I can't guarantee you can live a life off of those dollars.
Hmm.
And that's the important point. And what would happen in like a fixed money system or a sound money system? Well, you wouldn't get the dollar, you wouldn't get the Bitcoin, but it wouldn't get to that point where you have so many people that are about to be left with possibly nothing. I think that's the key is that uh, the booms and busts happen a lot sooner and they're a lot shorter. And so we never allow these huge collapses to really happen. Um, and I don't even know if like the Great Depression is even a good example of fully sound money because we still had some form of fractional reserve in there,
Hmm.
I believe,
Yeah,
because the Fed was created in
Dal-
what, like
yeah,
early
Dalio.
1900s.
Yeah, Dalio was talking today. Even if you looked at the inflation and like how fast it took place, like even with the 1929 crash, it took about what 13 years out of that entire Great Depression. Is like that money expansion was even it was that long that it took it to go through the system, and then the 70s you had something a little bit different with the devaluation that was a currency, and then the 2008 housing crisis, that inflation, that money creation was a little bit shorter. And then now, though, you look at the money creation now, and in April they just created the last stimulus, and it was just like that. It's happening faster and faster and faster.
Yep, and I heard on Breedlove's What Is Money show with I'm blanking on his name now, the technology guy,
Um,
Jeff Booth.
there you go, the Booth series.
Yeah, he said something that really stuck out to me. He said if you were to tax all the companies in the United States on 100% of their profits of last year or the year before, it adds up to $2.5 trillion. And think about taxing 100% of profits. Think about how much money we just printed. Printed double that just last year from our COVID response. So I think what's the scary part is all of the devaluation and the manipulation still lies ahead of us. We haven't seen anything yet. And as the money leaves the system, interest rates have to go up. And if interest rates go up, the government can't pay.
Right.
So they are forced into a corner where they're gonna say, oh yeah, we'll let rates normalize, but they'll be boxed into a corner. How quickly does almost every company on the stock market become unprofitable with the rising rates? Society would literally fall apart. The government will be bankrupt. There's no money. So that's a very bad scenario, and I don't think they're going to let that happen. So they're going to go with the other alternative, which is, well, we'll just print money and we'll buy the bonds to keep the interest rates down and just keep the charade going. And I think I ultimately, like I said, I think there's been a lot of unintended consequences, and I think the Fed realizes that they don't have a way out, and extending until they have a solution is their best alternative. And so that's kind of what a lot of people in Bitcoin have talked about, is that we don't want this crack up boom to happen, because ultimately the faster this happens, the worse it's going to be. We need to give people time to acquire this new asset and for the ecosystem to get more developed. Because if it was just overnight, the dollar's dead, I think it would be I think it would be chaos. Yeah. Bitcoin is not ready to handle that either. So it's a very sticky situation that we're in, and I think people are just coming to this realization that the game's over, but no one knows what to do.
Well, they should buy Bitcoin. That's ultimately what we should do. I've been saying that for a long time too. But I want to turn the tide, man. Let's talk about Miami. So BTC Miami, Bitcoin 2021. I'm pumped up about this. Last time I went to a Bitcoin conference was in January of 2018 down in Miami, and it was a North American Bitcoin conference, and that was right after we ended the last bull market. I remember when I got off the plane, that's when the news about the whole BitConnect scandal had also broke. Like right there, right then, it was just at the market top. There was Lambos. No one knew then that it was the market top, although some people probably knew. And when that conference was going on, it was still like cloud nine. And then, that ended up leading us into a 2.5 year bear market. So I'm really pumped to get back down there. There's going to be a lot of good speakers. You and I are going to be down there along with a few other buddies attending the conference. And it sounds like it's going to be a good turnout. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of good vibes down there. I'm really excited. And I'm also glad that it is, or at least it should be, a Bitcoin-only conference. Last time I went, there's a lot of shit coins. There was a lot of ICOs. Like that whole craze was going on. But it's going to be a good event. What are you looking forward to the most out of it?
So yeah, well, what am I looking forward to the most? The first class flight that we're taking. That's one of them. I've never actually flown first class, so that'll be a very interesting thing. But
cashback.
I'm just excited to be there and to actually be able to meet some people that I've followed on Twitter forever, and they're going to be, in person. I
Mhm.
assume there's going to be a lot of hovering around people. So it'll be nice to talk to some of the smaller guys that I know, or like the plebs,
Yeah.
basically, like just to be like, yo, what's good? I'm excited for like Max and Michael Saylor.
Yep.
I think that's going to be a good talk. I mean, I'm just excited for it all around.
I think it's going to be
I
good
think,
vibes all around. Like it's going to be
I,
like,
yeah, I think like 2017 also solidified the idea like if you get it, you get it, and you know that it's Bitcoin only,
mhm.
and that. So I think the whole vibe is kind of switching. Like everyone that's going to this conference basically is a maximalist. Probably got wiped out or got wrecked really hard in 2017 by the ICOs. I think that's just a part of the learning curve. Is you have to learn through failure, and I think a lot of people. It's very rare that you find somebody so deep into Bitcoin who hasn't been burned by a shitcoin at some point, one or another. So
It's everyone, man.
I think there's a large vocal majority now that are in that boat because of the amount of people that were involved in 2017. That the Bitcoin only crowd is really starting to gain a voice. So I'm very excited for that too. Um, I think it's just going to be a wild time, to be honest. Like I don't know. It's going to be awesome. I'm going to try to do some networking with some people, and maybe I'm really interested in getting into Lightning, and I'm finding like the more and more I've watched like so many videos about Bitcoin, and like there's always like one or two videos that really gets me like holy shit, like this is what I have to start committing my life to. I think like I need to be one of those founding fathers of like I helped build this, like there is no fate, Satoshi is the face and the name of Bitcoin, I guess, but ultimately he only started it. He started the snowball, and it's still rolling. And so I think it's really important to think about like time preference, and this is also going back to Ross Stevens' latest video. He talks about like in Scotland or Ireland, wherever, way back in the day, when you were a peasant and it was your first time going into the city, you see these massive chapels, 80 feet tall, made of brick or stone, stained glass, and you're just in awe that a human built this.
Mm.
And you're talking about the ultimate low time preference thing. It's like it was an 80, 100-year project to build some of these things, and they last the test of time. And I think it's important to think about this. It's like, well, we still have what 100 and approximately 120 years until we reach zero terminal inflation in Bitcoin. We won't know what it's like, and if you have a kid today, assuming that life expectancy doesn't go through the roof, they're not going to know what it's like, and their kids are going to be very old, if not dead, to know what it's like to
Mm.
be in that system. Talk about long time preference, building your citadel type of thing. Like we're building something so much bigger than us. We will not be alive to see even the fruits of that. We'll begin to see the changes in society. We'll be able to experience the wealth created from this, and we'll be able to really start understanding what it's like to be sovereign. But at the end of the day, this is so much bigger than us. And so, I'm really excited to connect with some of the developers and kind of figure out how I can help. You know,
Well, getting into it, man. Shout out pompcryptojobs.com. If anyone out there is looking for a job in the Bitcoin and crypto space, you could head there. It's a job listing website. That's what I used. So, Jack, I mean, in the same boat as you, and I'm pretty pumped that contributing more full time in the space and in the ecosystem, and at least got a foot in the door, and I'm starting to build. And we talk about it all the time. Um, but I think doing like this type of stuff and going to the conferences, and then actually getting out there and getting our hands dirty is the way to do it. That brings up a good point, man. Do you wanna run us through a? You want to flash the charts real quick? We'll look at the price. We'll look at the mempool and see what that's looking like, and we can kind of
yeah, I
go
mean,
there.
we could quickly go over it, but I do have to head out in probably a minute or so, actually.
flashes quick, man.
So yeah, um, basically a lot of things have happened in the recent times. Sorry for the messy chart. Put it on a 4 hour. We had a lot of Elon FUD. It looks like we made a double bottom. And now we're kind of moving back up. This white line was my resistance untested line, which is about at 41K. And during the Elon scandal, or whatever you want to call it, we blew right through it down to 30K, bounced right back above it. We didn't hold, retested the bottom. And it looks like we found support, and we're in the process of making a new leg up.
Hmm.
I think people got very emotional, and there's a lot of people in the space who bought Bitcoin without even understanding what Bitcoin is. They don't know how to form a transaction. They don't know anything about it. They bought it because it's going to get more expensive, and I think a lot of those people had to get wiped out. And if you don't want to be one of those people where you're a slave to the price, you need to start doing your homework, learning how to transact, learn how to move coins around, learn how to be more private through coin joins, take your money off exchanges, learn about multi-signature, learn about Lightning. I think Lightning is one of the biggest things that people need to learn about, because it is the future. I ultimately see a world where the average person is not ever going to transact on layer one. It's going to be all on layer two. So while you have Elon Musk talking about the scalability of Dogecoin and all this, like, we already went through that in 2017. We know what the answer is. We know what the market wants. So it's a lot of noise. The two things that have kept me super bullish in the short term is I think we just hit the threshold of 95% of all hash has signaled for Taproot,
Yep.
which will be a major scalability upgrade, and it will be a privacy upgrade. In short, from what I got from Andreas, when you have these scripts or these multi-signature transactions, it basically can derive a public key, or a private key and a public key, from the sum of all of the private and public keys involved. And so it compresses them into one transaction. So I think this is very important, especially for Lightning, because Lightning is very easy to find on the blockchain. Almost anything going into a 2 of 2 multi-sig is going into a Lightning channel. So this will basically only show a basic transaction for everything. Multi-sig not, and it will compress a lot of this data into very small transactions. So at the base layer, the average person will only see a reduction in fees. But if you are more technical in terms of Bitcoin, this is going to be a huge upgrade, and it's going to start making Bitcoin way more private. And I think one of the things that Andreas was pretty bullish about is this is the building block of privacy. And he says he believes that we can iterate on this so fast that regulators will not be able to keep up with the pace of change to regulate the regulate the privacy behind this. And that's super bullish. Speaking of which, it looks like we're starting to move upward again. This just looks like a consolidation pump pattern. I'm very bullish on the price. I think we're going up. Everything about the dip said long-term holders were buying. There's no more coins on exchanges. And one more thing, I think everyone needs to learn about Lightning. So this is a visual representation of the Lightning Network, which is really just a mesh network of nodes connecting to other nodes and routing payments through other nodes, and that's becoming a future business that I'm looking to get into, and that's something that I really want to learn at Miami too, is talk to some people about this. So essentially, the cluster in the interior is all the nodes connected, and everything on the outside is all the nodes that are currently not connected via channel. So these are all nodes that exist that will probably be future nodes. And so I'll just quickly zoom in here. This pink is showing the largest node in the network, which is async, and the pink is every single node that has a channel open with async. So this is basically would be the biggest city in digital land, and so everyone has
Who owns Async? Are they just
Async is a company. They're one of the Lightning developers. So it's they own.
and
I think it's a Phoenix.
each one of those individual dots is a node on the Lightning Network that's accepting.
Yeah, so I could go somewhere out here and like this is just some random person. The
Mhm.
chieftain's jungle. It's just some dude. It looks like he has two nodes open. That's it. And he probably found that, hey, maybe these are some of his friends. It looks like he's connected over here to 1ml.com, which is another massive node. So he's building up his network that way. So the more connected you are, the more likely people will want to open a channel with you. And we can definitely get into that into the future, but
Yeah,
unfortunately for today, I do not have enough time.
no, that's all good. I think that's good though, Jack.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to be learning a lot more about Lightning down in Miami. Lightning, even for me, is definitely it's the next venture. It's the next form of scalability. For those that don't know what Lightning Network, again, it's the second layer from Bitcoin. So you have Bitcoin as we know it today, but with Bitcoin as we know it today, it's not really cost effective to send these like micropayments for like coffees and small amounts to use like a currency. But there's what's called the Lightning Network that's being built as the next layer of Bitcoin, which is going to make it so you and I can spend Bitcoin or what they call like LBTC anywhere around the world for
It is Bitcoin. It is a
send
real
it.
Bitcoin transaction.
Yeah, it's a Bitcoin transaction. You send it, it's seconds, not even a second. It settles, and for much lower fees than anyone in the market right now. So it'll be big to see that, man. And and I think we could even call it there, dude. I think that's going to be it for tonight. I'm gonna let you
Sounds
go.
good with me.
All right, man. So we'll catch up with everyone again soon. Again, if you want to join a Telegram group, we've got the Bitcoin Money Peace Telegram chat link in the description. We got about 15 people in there now. We talk all about Bitcoin, crypto, trading. So if you're really interested in the space, it's a good place to get resources and learn more. If you want to get more of this content, you can subscribe to my email list and also find me on my website. All right, Jack. Miami it is. We'll be reporting back.
Sounds good, Joe.
All right, y'all. Take care.